Graham Mack.
BBC Radio York.
The UKIP MEP, Godfrey Bloom, has tried to brush off describing a room full of women at the UKIP conference as a place full of sluts. The Yorkshire and Humber MEP was addressing a fringe event called Women in Politics. Mr. Bloom used the word during an exchange about women who don't clean behind the fridge. Speaking to reporters afterwards, he said it was a joke, and all the women laughed.
I think all the girls said, no, none of us clean behind the fridge. And I made a joke and said, oh, well, you're all sluts. And everybody laughed, including all the women. I don't know what we're trying to go with it.
Do you think that's acceptable?
I think people don't understand the difference between the word slut and slag. Maybe it's something to do with a lack of grammar skills in our education.
Oh, right, could be.
But you think that's acceptable to say the room is full of sluts?
Do you know what the word slut actually means?
Well, I think that most people would find it, most women would find it derogatory.
I think you're
well, what does it mean to you, Mr. Godfrey?
Was there a single woman in there that didn't laugh at the joke, you sad little man?
Godfrey Bloom also raised eyebrows when he hit a Channel 4 journalist over the head with a copy of UKIP's conference guide and then called him a racist. I spoke to Steve Crowther, the party chairman of UKIP, about these incidents and also Nigel Farage's speech to his party's annual conference.
Nigel really made a thundering speech today, and as he said, what he's really done is to look forward to the next 20 years. We're 20 years old, and this is our 20th conference, or 20th anniversary conference, and so we're doing a certain amount of nostalgia, but we're really looking forward to another 20 years. And Nigel, I think, has made it quite clear. He reviewed where we've got to, and where we've got to is that we have already changed the complexion of British politics. There are now 4 kids on the block. UKIP is right in there with the Conservatives, Labour and the Liberal Democrats, and we intend to become the third force in British politics very rapidly, and we intend to push for the referendum that the people of this country want on the future of our relationship with the European Union.
Did Nigel say anything about racism or sexism?
He did refer to the fact that we have been accused in the past of being a racist party.
Well, the reason why I say this is because I was supposed to talk to Godfrey Bloom. Unfortunately, he says he's not well, so it was 20 minutes before we were due to interview him.
I'm not aware of Godfrey's state of health, I'm afraid.
Godfrey he said a few things recently. He's described women as sluts.
Actually, what I think you're referring to is that in a UKIP fringe meeting earlier on today, in a response to some of the UKIP women on the panel saying that they weren't necessarily interested in cleaning behind the fridge, which is a bit of an old gag.
But he did use the phrase sluts, didn't he?
He did, yes, but he was quite clearly attempting to be funny.
One of UKIP's most prominent women members has called on the party's MEP, Godfrey Bloom, to consider his position.
Really?
After he admitted referring to women as sluts.
Who's that?
Diane James.
Has she indeed? Okay, well, fair enough. I would fully respect Diane's view on that.
Is Godfrey Bloom a bit of a loose cannon in UKIP?
Godfrey's certainly an individual and an individualist, and he does he speaks colourfully, and he gives his opinion forcefully, and sometimes it does get him into trouble. He
hit a journalist today.
Well, as I understand it, he had an altercation with a journalist about a particular subject concerning our conference programme. I haven't seen the incident itself, so I'm not in a position to comment any further on that.
And he's also used the phrase bongo bongo land.
Indeed, and I have made it clear at the time that I thought that was, again, a language which I didn't think that was appropriate for him to use. However, I also made clear at the time that the issue that he was raising, which was the £1 billion a month that we send now in foreign aid to countries abroad, is an issue which was important that he should raise. And in fact, what happened was that over the next week or 10 days, it became quite clear that it was an important issue and that the people of this country feel very deeply about it.
UKIP leader Nigel Farage said that he will not tolerate racism or sexism. Does that mean that it's all over for Godfrey Bloom and UKIP?
That's a very odd question. If UKIP leader Nigel Farage says that he will not tolerate racism or sexism, then I'm absolutely with him. Godfrey isn't, I don't believe, either of those things, but he does sometimes express himself in a way that I would prefer that he didn't.
Last time he did it and Nigel Farage dealt with it was the Bongo Bongo incident. What did Nigel say? Because Godfrey doesn't seem to have got the message.
Well, actually, it was me. I actually said to Godfrey at the time as chairman of the party, look, I really don't think that was the right way to express yourself. However, I do believe that the subject you were raising was a very important one. So, I told him that time, and Godfrey and I will be having a discussion later on today about the way he's expressed himself today.
Steve Crowther, the UKIP party chairman. Well, it's been announced while that interview was playing that Godfrey Bloom has had the UKIP whip removed. I'm sure this story will run and run, and whatever happens, you'll hear all about it right here on BBC Radio York. I think health and safety has gone way too far now, to the point where it's harming us. I'm walking around York this afternoon. I'm on Gilligate, and there's I think it's a toy shop there, and they must be having some work done on the front of the shop, and there's all scaffolding in front of it. But every scaffold pole has been wrapped in foam, like a spongy stuff, so that if you bump into it, it doesn't hurt. That is so wrong. When you walk into a scaffold pole, it's supposed to hurt. It's supposed to hurt so you know that you shouldn't walk into scaffold poles. Detailed plans for the reburial of the last Yorkist king, Richard III, have been revealed by Leicester Cathedral. A legal challenge to his reinterment continues to be brought by the Plantagenet Alliance, who want the king's bones brought to York, where they belong. But nevertheless, plans to not only inter the king in Leicester, but redesign his surroundings are being finalised. Joining me is the project manager for Leicester Cathedral, Peter Hobson. Good evening, Peter.
Good evening, Graham.
Jumping the gun here, aren't you?
Absolutely not. It'd be a dereliction of duty not to have some plans ready so that when the dust settles, if it settles the way that we think it will, but who knows, but if it does, somebody's got to be ready to act. The licence says 31st of August next year, and that's not that far away for the sort of stuff we're talking about.
Do you think York Minster should be making similar plans?
No, nobody's asked York Minster to make similar plans. Our position is actually very simple. I understand the patriotism of Yorkshire people. You'll understand that people in Leicester feel the same way about their area, but that's not really the point at issue. The point at issue is a legally issued licence was given to the University of Leicester, who did the dig. They asked Leicester Cathedral to prepare, and we can't not do that. Unless and until anything changes, we can't not plan for it, because otherwise time would run out and nothing would happen, and I can't think that's what anyone would want for our last Plantagenet king.
But it was just lucky for Leicester that he died in battle. If he'd have survived that battle, Leicester wouldn't even have any claim at all. It would all be York, wouldn't it?
Absolutely, Graham. Well, there's lots of ifs and buts. If he'd survived that battle, I imagine that Westminster would be the place we'd be talking about, but history is what history is. He died in battle, and people who die in battle are usually laid to rest where they die. He's rested in Leicester for over 500 years, hasn't he?
Yeah, but you didn't even know he was there.
No, I think we did.
You were fairly confident he was under that car park.
No. The Richard III Society were very confident. We knew he'd been buried in Leicester. Everyone knew he'd been buried in Leicester. There was this story put around by the 17th century historian John Speed, who said he was dug up and his bones were thrown in the River Soar, which, by the way, is in Leicester. So he was here one way or t'other, but the people who were confident he was still where he'd been buried turned out to be right. Brilliant story, isn't it?
What do you think he would have wanted? Because his descendants don't seem to favour the Leicester option.
Well,
it seems that Leicester looking, Leicester, I mean, York's got everything and Leicester's not got as much, let's face it. And Leicester has just been a bit more opportunist, haven't they?
I can see where you're coming from, Graham. Interesting point about the descendants. Of course, the Plantagenet Alliance, a group of people who say they're related, and fair enough, they may be. Statistically, I think BBC more or less programme calculated between 1 and 17 million people are related to Richard. So if we're consulting them, it's a lot of consultation. The one person we know is related to Richard, because the DNA test proved it, Michael Ibsen, is firmly saying he believes he should be buried in Leicester. So if we go the route, what would he have wanted? What do his family, what do his relatives think? I think it cuts both ways, to be honest.
It is a bit premature since the judicial review.
No,
it's still
not.
underway.
No.
Isn't it?
The review is not setting up some other decision-making process. It's reviewing the people who had to make the decision. Ministry of Justice, University of Leicester. They've asked us to do this. We can't not do it. If they'd asked York Minster to do it, York Minster would be doing the same. But they didn't.
Well, I don't think they've got £96,000 to throw at her, which is what you're spending on the tomb, and you might not even get him.
Well, the decision will be made, and then we'll find the money, and then we'll do it. But I imagine that the people that think a lot of Richard III would not want him buried in a hole in the corner in some sort of under a small slab, out of the way. We're going to do it properly, and I imagine that the public of Leicester and indeed the public of England and maybe the world will want to help us once it's agreed where it's happening.
Okay, explain what this. Just describe the tomb to us. What do we get for £96,000?
Right. Richard's remains themselves will be in a coffin in a vault below the ground. Anyone that's been to Leicester Cathedral will know there's already a memorial stone to Richard saying his remains are laid to rest in this parish, which they have done for 500 plus years. So that's roughly the location. It's in the chancel of the cathedral. On the ground above where the remains are, there'll be a white Yorkist rose in beautiful marble, and round the edge, inscribed in black, will be his name, his dates, and his family motto. And then above that, on top, a really beautiful, solid piece of stone. It's actually going to be Yorkshire stone. You may or may not be pleased to hear. It's Swaledale Fossil is the name of the stone. You can look at it, and it sort of speaks of the ages. Incised into that will be a cross, the prime Christian symbol. It'll be facing the east window, the place of the resurrection, and Richard, who was the most devout of men himself, as we know, will be placed in the heart of a cathedral facing the scene of the resurrection, which, if we're going to speculate what he would have wanted, I'm going to say he would have loved what we planned.
And if the judicial review says he has to be buried in York Minster, can we have the tomb?
Well, it's our design, but we're happy to talk to York Minster. In fact, they're our friends. We talk to each other all the time. But just to clarify again, Graham, the judicial review cannot decide where he will be buried. The judicial review, the judge can say the decision-making process was done properly or was not done properly. What he's done is given the Plantagenet Alliance a day in court to argue their case that it wasn't done properly. We don't yet know what he'll say. If he says it wasn't done properly, the decision still has to be made. It's not the judge's decision.
If he makes a mistake and something goes wrong and he does end up in Leicester, what changes will be made to Leicester Cathedral?
Come and have a look, Graham. We'd love to welcome you, but it's not a big cathedral, as people will know. It's a parish church cathedral. It's a very beautiful church, and we're all very fond of it.
It's no York Minster, to be fair.
Absolutely. York Minster's brilliant. I've been there many a time. I love it. It's no York Minster. We're not in a competition about how good our church is, Graham. Well, we're not. I don't think York Minster are. We're about what's been given to us to do for the nation, and at the moment, unless and until it changes, it's been given to us to do. And you wouldn't want us, I'm sure the people of Yorkshire, I'm sure even the Plantagenet Alliance would not want us to mess this up.
Project manager for Leicester Cathedral, Peter Hobson. Good to talk to you. Thanks for your time,
Absolutely,
Peter.
anytime.
At the heart of North Yorkshire. BBC Radio York.
Now, I was on earlier about something I saw in York today. It's some scaffolding outside a shop. So the scaffolding goes over the pavement. But this stuff has got yellow foam around the scaffold tubes. So the scaffold tubes are like the diameter of about 6 inches now, instead of the usual 1.5 inches or whatever a scaffold tube is. See, now when you walk into the scaffold tube, it won't hurt. When you walk into a scaffold tube, it's supposed to hurt. That's how you learn not to walk into scaffold tubes and to look where you're going. This is more dangerous than not having the foam on there. And I've thought of another one that's even more sinister. Child-proof caps. You think about it. To get the child-proof cap off, say, a bottle of aspirin, not only have you got to be kind of physically strong because you've got to push that thing down, but you've also got to be intelligent enough to work out that you've got to match up those 2 arrows and then push it down and turn it at the same time. Now, what they're saying is that children won't be able to do this, but just imagine, if there was a child who was physically strong enough to do that, and who had the intelligence to know that you're supposed to match up the 2 little arrows and then push it down at the same time. You're talking about some kind of superhuman kid. And what are we going to do? We're going to poison them with aspirin. Is that a good idea?